On the morning of December 5th, 1872, the Atlantic Ocean appeared almost peaceful. A merchant ship named the Dei Gratia was sailing through the waters between the Azores and Portugal when something unusual appeared on the horizon. Another vessel. At first, there was nothing particularly alarming about the sight. Ships crossed these waters regularly, carrying cargo between Europe and the Americas. But as the crew of the Dei Gratia watched the distant vessel, something began to feel wrong. The ship was moving strangely. Its sails were set, but its course was erratic. It seemed to drift rather than sail with purpose, turning awkwardly through the water as though no one were controlling it. Captain David Morehouse ordered his men to watch the vessel carefully. Through the distance they eventually identified her, the Mary Celeste. Morehouse knew the ship. She had departed New York more than a week before the Dei Gratia, bound for Genoa, Italy. If everything had gone according to plan, she should have been far ahead of them. Instead, she was here, drifting alone in the Atlantic. The Dei Gratia drew closer. The men searched the deck for movement. They saw none. No sailor appeared at the rail, no officer called across the water, no one responded to their signals. The Mary Celeste continued to drift silently beneath the Atlantic sky. Eventually, Captain Morehouse made a decision. He would send men aboard. A small boat was lowered into the water, and the boarding party rowed toward the abandoned vessel. As they climbed onto the deck of the Mary Celeste, they entered one of the greatest maritime mysteries in history. The ship was still afloat. Its cargo was largely intact. Personal belongings remained aboard. There was food and fresh water. There was no obvious evidence of a catastrophic attack, but the captain was gone. His wife was gone. Their young daughter was gone. Every member of the crew was gone. 10 people had vanished from the Mary Celeste, and none of them would ever be seen again. To understand what happened aboard that ship, we have to return to New York City several weeks earlier. In November 1872, the Mary Celeste was preparing for another voyage across the Atlantic. She was not a ghost ship then. She was a working merchant brigantine, approximately 100 feet long, built to transport cargo across dangerous ocean routes. Her captain was Benjamin Briggs. Briggs was 37 years old, an experienced seaman from Massachusetts who had spent much of his life at sea. He was not known as reckless, he was not inexperienced, he was a respected captain from a seafaring family, and by 1872 he had commanded several vessels. This voyage was important to him. Briggs had invested money in the Mary Celeste himself. He believed in the ship. And unlike many merchant voyages of the period, this one would include his family. His wife, Sarah, would travel with him. So would their 2-year-old daughter, Sophia. Their older son would remain behind in Massachusetts to attend school. The rest of the people aboard were experienced sailors selected for the voyage. First mate Albert Richardson, second mate Andrew Gilling, steward Edward Head, and 4 German sailors, Volkert Lorenzen, Arian Martens, Gottlieb Goetschall, and Boz Lorenzen. In total, 10 people would cross the Atlantic aboard the Mary Celeste. Their destination was Genoa. Their cargo was industrial alcohol. More than 1,700 barrels of it were loaded into the hold. It was valuable cargo, but it also presented a danger. Alcohol produces highly flammable vapor. On November 7th, 1872, the Mary Celeste left New York Harbor. The coastline slowly disappeared behind her. Ahead lay thousands of kilometers of open ocean. For the first days of the voyage, there is no evidence that anything extraordinary occurred. Captain Briggs kept a log. The ship moved east across the Atlantic. The crew worked. Sarah cared for Sophia. The Mary Celeste pushed toward Europe. But the Atlantic in November could be unpredictable. Weather conditions deteriorated. The ship encountered rough seas. Strong winds battered the vessel, and progress became difficult. Yet nothing in the surviving record suggests that Captain Briggs believed his ship was doomed. Then, as the Mary Celeste approached the Azores, the written record began to reach its end. On November 24th, the Mary Celeste was approaching the Azores. The next morning, November 25th, the ship's position was recorded near Santa Maria Island. It would become the final surviving entry in the ship's log. After that, the voices aboard the Mary Celeste disappear from history. 10 days later, the Dei Gratia found her drifting across the Atlantic. When the boarding party stepped onto her deck, the mystery deepened immediately. The ship was abandoned, but she was not a wreck. Some of her sails were damaged or missing. Ropes were hanging over the sides. There was water inside the vessel, but she remained afloat and capable of sailing. Most importantly, the Mary Celeste's small lifeboat was missing. That detail would become crucial. It suggested that the people aboard had not simply disappeared. They had left the ship. The question was why. Below deck, the men discovered more clues. The captain's navigational instruments were missing. The ship's papers were largely gone. The chronometer was gone. The sextant was gone. These were exactly the kinds of things a captain might take if he deliberately abandoned his vessel. Yet other possessions remained: clothing, personal belongings, food, supplies. There was no indication that the crew had prepared for an ordinary departure. And there was another important fact. The cargo remained aboard. Hundreds upon hundreds of barrels of alcohol were still sitting in the hold. When the cargo was eventually examined, 9 barrels were found empty, but the vast majority remained intact. There was no obvious explanation for why an experienced captain would order his wife, his 2-year-old daughter, and his entire crew into a small boat in the middle of the Atlantic while their ship remained afloat. Captain Morehouse now faced a difficult decision. The Mary Celeste was valuable, and so was her cargo. Under maritime salvage law, bringing an abandoned vessel safely into port could earn its rescuers a significant reward. Morehouse divided his crew. Some remained aboard the Dei Gratia. Others took control of the Mary Celeste.